Nice to meet you.
Good to see you.
All right, this is wonderful. There we go. Nice and cozy.
Now I'm a floating head here.
Yeah, there you go.
Like that, I'm a floating head.
That's
It was
very nice.
before.
Good morning,
Yeah,
David
better.
Jack. How are you on Wednesday morning?
Yeah, good. Got my coffee.
Excellent. How's the new book selling?
I don't know.
That's a real writer there. I don't know. I mean, I just assume I don't have any, until I get a notification from Amazon, like, oh, I sold a book. What the hell? So that's always more exciting. Hi.
Sorry,
Welcome,
can
Taylor.
I hear you?
Yeah.
How are you?
Doing well. How about yourself?
Not too bad, not too bad.
Good. Hi, Donnie. How's it going?
I'm great. How are you doing? It's good to see you.
Yeah, you as well. Hey, this is Mark Justice, and welcome to Between the Lines. We got a really special show today. We're going to do a Voices of Pride Day and celebrate the voices of the LGBTQ plus community. And we've got a panel of writers. So this is going to be exciting. My first panel interview. So I would like you to introduce yourselves to everyone. We'll start with David Jack.
Hi, everyone. As Mark just said, my name is David Jack Fletcher. I'm a horror writer, and I'm from Australia, in case the accent didn't give it away. And I really try to get... I mostly just do gay horror. So the protagonists are always, or usually a married couple or like a widow or something, but there's always that kind of, that gay element to it, which makes it authentic for me. And I've just finished my next book, but it's currently out with beta readers. So if anyone's interested, let me know. And hopefully that'll be out later this year.
Ivan?
Hi, my name is Ivan Lopez. I am a horror writer from Orlando, Florida. Currently working on a short story collection as a sort of follow-up to my novella that is available right now called The Town Beyond the Trees. And I also write some protagonists from the LGBTQ community, as well as POC protagonist as well, being that I am a Latino, so I like to have as much representation as possible within my stories. So yeah, that's me in a nutshell.
And Taylor?
So hi, I'm Taylor. So I'm probably I'm 27. I used to be anonymous on Instagram, and now I finally decide to show up, online. So this is kind of exciting for me. So personally, so probably some of you will discover me. So I was born in France, so I'm both British and French citizen. I'm living in London, United Kingdom, Shoreditch for those who know. I mean, it's And regarding my writing, so basically I'm a psychological thriller writer. So I'm currently working on Free Expensive Lies, which is basically the story of a master manipulator. I'm trying to democratize manipulators, and I know it's quite a big task, but that's what I want to do. I studied psychology as well. I'm also a blogger, so I've got a website and everything. I'm not publishing a lot on this. And also I am a pilot, piloting planes. And yes, so that's pretty much overall who I am.
Wonderful. So you could pick David Jack up and all of us, and then drop us off at my house.
So
you can also come to my house.
For this, I need to get a Boeing, and I still don't have the license for this.
Okay. We're working on that one next. Okay. And Donnie.
Hello, everyone. My name is Donnie Winter. I currently live in Midland, Michigan, right smack in the middle of Michigan in the United States. I am a poet. I write a lot of super gay poems. I currently have 2 collections that have been released over the past couple of years by Alien Buddha Press. I'm currently working on my 3rd, and it's been a roller coaster experience. There's been so much happening the past couple of years, but I have really enjoyed the experience so far, and I'm happy to be here.
Well, thank you all for coming, and this is going to be very exciting, and we're going to have fun with this. So, as David Jask asked me to talk about why am I personally interested in this, is because I'm an ally, and I am a safe space. And as a writer, I've gotten to know some of you. I've interviewed 2 of you, and I find it fascinating, everyone's process and how much we bring of ourselves into our writing. And I thought, coinciding with Pride Month, it seemed like a perfect opportunity to talk about these issues in a way that could reach out to others and bring the light on everyone. So thank you again for showing up. Let's see. I think, begin with, I know we've talked about what kind of writing that you like to do. What kind of genres do you enjoy reading? Taylor, what kind of genres of fiction or nonfiction do you enjoy reading?
So basically, I'm not really that much of a fiction writer, even though I'm also a fiction writer, which is quite paradoxical. However, I'm reading a lot of like what is like a politics book. Like, for example, recently I've been reading The Prince of Niccolo Machiavelli, which is obviously a masterpiece. I mean, it's basically, like, for fiction, I have like very high expectations, and as well, like already like talking about like earlier about like the length of books. I love like long books. I love like books that literally like drive you away from reality. This is what I'm actually like looking like when I'm reading fictions, and this is what I'm like trying to do myself as a writer, to actually like bring like the reader like far away from this actual lovely, beautiful place that is our world. So it's no, what I'm mostly reading is mostly like nonfiction. For example, like in my best and my favorite books, I've been reading like The Art of War of Sun Tzu recently. What else? On Liberty of John Stuart Mill. I actually love like like these books that actually like bring up something, and even like I can use this like as a tool. Like, for example, recently with a friend, we are co-writing the story of a baroness, of a politician. So it's like kind of like this manipulation, politics, and everything. So it's like kind of like bringing everything together. So that's pretty much what I'm into.
Okay. And Ivan, what do you enjoy reading?
So I mean, I do enjoy reading horror a lot, but when I'm not doing that, I actually read a lot of nonfiction and comedic nonfiction. At that, like one of my favorite reads was "The Year of Living Biblically" by A.J. Jacobs, and it was a he has what 3 or 4 books where he chooses a subject and then he goes for about a year or so researching this subject or immersing himself in this subject, kind of pointing out the absurdities of it. And so in this particular book, he went through a lot of rules and teachings of the Bible, and he tried for an entire year to live his life as literally to the Bible as possible. It drove his wife nuts. And it was actually it was a very funny read as well as a very enlightening one. And so I like reading books like that, and nonfiction books about some sciences and whatnot. As of right now, actually, on my bedside is oh my God, what was the title of it? It's a book about ants. Because I love ants, and I'm kind of an enthusiast when it comes to some animals and especially insects. So I'm actually reading a book about ants right now. So yeah, lot of nonfiction, a lot of comedic nonfiction, because I have this philosophy that in order, like, you can inspire your writing by reading your exact genre, but I like to read outside of a little bit of my genre, mostly comedic, because comedy has a lot of the similar formulas to horror. So it kind of helps me with my own formulas without completely copying inadvertently what I just read.
Right. It
So
makes sense.
yeah.
Right. It's easy to be obsessed with or read something we really like and then turn that out. Yeah, I get that. A lot of my early horror writing was just really bad Stephen King imitation, So it's so embarrassing. I'm so ashamed of that stuff. Just
Don't be
it's more
ashamed of that. I mean, at least you got to write something, and it's good to emulate the things that you like. But as long as you're self-aware of it, it'll start to become your own.
yeah. I guess I have a lot of shame carried over from my teenage years anyway. There's just so many things. I'm in my own unpacking and trying to come to terms with all that. But yes, thank you for giving me some of that. And Donnie, and what kind of genres do you like to read?
Well, when it comes to fiction, I love fantasy and sci-fi. I would say that those are my two biggest. The Lord of like anything Tolkien related is probably top tier for me. I love Tolkien. Now, when it comes to poetry, it kind of changes up a little bit. And it depends on the day. For poetry, there are a lot of like subgenres that kind of like bleed together a little bit. Lately, over the past probably year or two, my obsession has been cyberpunk. I've been using that as kind of inspiration. I use it for my inspiration for my second collection. And as I begin working on my third collection, I've been reading a lot of like different educational materials like about the philosophy behind cyberpunk and other punk subgenres like solar punk as well. So I've been reading a Cyborg Manifesto by Donna Haraway. I don't know if any of you have ever heard of it before. Super interesting. And let's see, I've been really obsessed with cyberpunk themed poem collections as well. My favorite currently is Susan Slaviero's Cyborgia, which basically embodies this idea of womanhood and how it's connected with the mechanical and how it kind of like breaks down that connection between the two. So but right now, if I'm going to be really random, I've also been reading like a lot of like do it yourself books. Like I've been really obsessed with gardening. It's springtime here, so I have like a whole bookshelf full of gardening books that I've just been reading constantly.
Are you going to do like a square foot gardening, or are you going to build like a sun house or anything, or do you know yet?
Well, I'm too lazy to build a sun house. I'm
Or
probably going like I have like a lot of like flower bed, raised bed space, so I'm just
okay,
gonna plant stuff in those.
nice. Yeah, I'm going to be doing some horticulture myself and start growing cannabis. So that's something I'm looking forward
Yes.
to. Yeah, it'll
Put
get
me in, please.
yeah. That's time. Ohio needs to make it legal. You know, I already got my perfect blend I'm working on. So I had to study horticulture. I'm studying all this, botany, so I can breed plants. It's very exciting. And David Jag, I'll have to edit probably all that out. I don't want the feds showing up at my door. Hey, Mark, got any pot in there? And David Jag, what kind of genres do you enjoy reading?
Uh, it used to be very academic, and Donnie, I used to teach a class about Donna Haraway's Cyborg Manifesto. So, and I used her work in my honors thesis and some of it in my PhD. So, if you ever need someone to talk to,
I might hit you up on that. That sounds super awesome.
But I'm kind of transitioning away from academia now. Still, like, we can talk about it, but I'm transitioning away, and so I normally read crime fiction. I like the fast-paced kind of thrillers. I love psychological thrillers as well. Two of my favorite authors, one is Jack Curley. He's American. He's got about 20 or so books, all in a series. And the other one is Simon Koenig, who, Taylor, you might know. He's from the UK, and he does a lot of crime fiction and thrillers.
Okay.
So yeah, I really like that sort of the fast-paced thriller and lots of twists and turns. And I find that it kind of helps me understand the narrative structure a bit, how to kind of plant those seeds for a really good twist at the end throughout, and throw the reader a little bit. But I've also been getting into, I'm just looking at them here, into like biographies. So I don't know if anyone knows Bruce Campbell. Ivan, you would 100% know Bruce Campbell, yeah.
Hail to the king, baby.
So I'm really getting into that sort of thing. And like what Ivan was saying before, comedy and horror share a lot of the same conventions, but it's presented in different ways. And so I've been getting like comedian biographies to read, and it's been really interesting. So yeah, I don't really have a lot of time to read really thick books, because I like to read in one sitting. So if I'm going to pick a book, it's like, that's what I'm doing today for the next like 5 hours or so. So the thick books are like the 800-page ones are kind of out for me for the most part. But
you can't take that, spread that over 2-3 days.
Oh, look, I can. It just bugs me when I can't finish in one sitting.
Okay. No, that's good. That's good. That's good.
I mean, I can relate with that, like with all, because I work in higher education, with all the grading that I have to do, which means a lot of reading. Sitting down to read an 800-page book just sounds so exhausting.
Because it might take you a year to get through it, because sometimes, as I was an educator as well, and I taught English composition, so I did a lot of papers. And for about a decade, I did not read anything for pleasure, because I read so much. And I just wanted a break. My eyeballs said, no more words today. I don't even want to watch a movie with subtitles. I just, so I completely understand that. But then to be able to read for pleasure after getting away from academia, and then getting to read for pleasure again, it was like the most luxurious experience. So I appreciate the time constraints involved with that. Another just kind of a broad question that, I'll let you kind of chime in as you want, instead of having to direct everyone, if that makes it easier. What made you want to start writing, or to be a writer?
I'll start if everyone else needs a minute to think about it. For me, it's just in me. Like, I have to. I don't know if that's similar for anyone else, but it's like you've got these ideas, and it's in there, and you need to get it out. So for me, there's really no other option.
For me, I relate with that as well. Like, I always have felt like it's been part of me, right? I discovered that I loved writing when it became kind of cathartic. When I was much younger and really didn't have anything else to turn to other than writing. And as I've gotten older, I've of course honed the craft a bit, and being able to teach other people writing, I've learned how to appreciate the history of my own journey as well, if that makes sense. Because I view writing as like an extension of myself. Like, I feel like I'm taking little pieces of myself and putting them on the page, and in some way preserving that, if that makes sense. So it's not only cathartic, but it also feels like it is allowing me to live in different places, if that makes sense.
As kind of like a documentation. I know we had talked about this on our episode. Is it that sense of the combination of exploring, where you are at a given time, as much as documenting it, or is it a sharing it, or all the above?
I would say it's all of the above. For poetry, specifically for me, I really connect poetry with places, and that connects with like the places that I inhabit as well, or the others that I write about where they inhabit too. So it's I would say it is definitely all of the above.
Okay. All right. Ivan, Taylor, or
I mean,
Taylor?
it's
Well,
always been in me as well.
Oh, sorry.
Uh, from a very young age, I've been doing it. So it's one of those things I can't pinpoint what triggered it because I've been doing it for so long. Uh, but I've always loved the escapism that I can bring to myself. And I mean, the world can be an ugly place, you know, and that that escapism really helps. And even if it is a horror story, um, but I've always loved language, and and I've loved what we can do with storytelling to send a message. And it's so much more than just saying it. You know, I love the subtleties. I love the metaphors. I love all of that symbolism. It's something I've always been into. So, which is one of the reasons why I loved horror writing so much. There's so much of that, uh, and it reflects the present times so much, whether it wants to or not. It tends to do that, and that admiration has always kept me going from a very young age.
Horror is a great genre, and that you're right, and it can be innately conservative and reaffirming of kind of some values. I taught a class on horror as well, and but it also appeals to the worst in us. That just below the psychic level, there's that all those nasty thoughts that we have, and that's why we can see these horrible images. And when we watch a horror movie, someone gets killed early on in the film and we laugh at that or something like that because we're like, oh yeah, if we don't like them, they're dead. That's releasing some of those things that Stephen King says, the alligators in our subconscious. That's what good horror can do. So it is definitely a pressure valve release in that regard. you know so I
I
totally get that.
Yeah,
think
so
horror is,
I think. Oh,
sorry, I was
I
just going to say that I think horror is one of those genres that it's always been designed for the space of the other. So,
mm,
you know, and the same with sci-fi and fantasy. It's one of those really explorative genres where it can actually be less about the people dying and the blood and the gore, and much more about the kind of the socio-political context that the stories emerge in and the characters kind of live through. So it can be extremely powerful for me.
I mean, yeah,
absolutely.
personally, what led me to write is like, I think it's like most of you, because you mentioned like creativity and everything. Mostly in my case is like, I feel like I need to write to create. It's because like basically like one thing I'm scared of is like just like leaving this planet without like leaving a trace of the fact that I've been here. So this is why, and psychological thriller, I mean, is quite similar to horror in some points. I mean, in like very, very wide thing. But yeah, it's I feel like this is more like the place where I feel like more comfortable than this. It's more like how, like dealing with like what I've been like always fascinating about was like what the brain can be and can bring, like how some people may like have like some not twisted mind, but like some like, you know, ideas. And so we've got like different, like, yeah, we've got like illusionists, we've got manipulators, we've got mentalists as well. And this is why like this people have like somehow a superpower, and it's like a superpower that I love to exploit. And what led me to write was like first like um, getting rid of, you know, like my pain, being a transgender myself, and then after like trying to like leave something to actually like, you know, like having like a free space where you can actually like leave everything, like where you can be like truly yourself, the person you actually want to be, like, and you cannot be like, you know, in the real society. So that's why.
That makes perfect sense. I mean, if that's a part of identity and struggling for identity and finding out who we are, it is an escape in that perfect world that we're creating. We can be anything, you know. I think that's one of the
was
appeals.
mostly It was mostly like a therapy in my case. I mean, I've been writing for like, I mean, since I'm like a teen, and it's like all the time it's been like mostly like a therapy on how to like vent on everything. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Taylor, I really resonated with what you said about kind of like leaving something of yourself behind in this world, because that's very much how I view writing myself. And I think a lot of that can probably be attributed to the fact that many of us in the LGBTQ plus community, you know, have lived a portion of our lives where we've had people taking things away, or we've been minimized or erased in some capacity. And writing, at least for me, has kind of filled those vacancies where people have kind of removed those things, if that makes sense. So,
Yeah.
yeah, I really resonated with that.
And the other thing is like, as we are all part of the LGBT, I mean, our work is not only like for ourselves, it's mostly like designed for like educating people on who we are. I mean, because like, for example, in Europe and same as the US, and I guess same in Australia as well, there's a lot of conservatism. Like conservatism is like mostly coming back, and for some reason we're like discriminated for no reason. Like for example, I wrote about this like in my blog recently. We are like discriminated, we're like marginalized, like for most of, just because we just actually want to be ourselves. It's not like we're not committing crimes, we just want to be the person we really are. And so yeah, this is why it's important to leave like a trace behind, so it can like probably like bring in the future to someone like for example in my case, who has like gender identity issues, like some like grounds to say that, you know, someone before him, her, they would actually did that and had the courage to actually go through this in probably like much difficult circumstances. I mean, I feel like the world is gonna like evolve in the good way towards this, but obviously it's like still a long way to go, unfortunately.
We're going to stumble a few times before we get there. Now, I like what you had to say there, because that's one thing I've noticed. My own personal writing, I I I don't think, and I don't write with characters who are necessarily um, uh, sexual. I think I just read enough H.P. Lovecraft at a younger age to realize what happens when people have sex. They just have mutants or cannibals, you know, and nothing good comes from sexual union. And not being one who likes romance and those things, I always wrote genre, because genre skipped all those kinds of issues that I found no personal interest in. So I'm a little detached, but I also understand though how cathartic and healing writing can be when you're bringing something of yourself into the story, into the poem. So I understand that as well. So I guess what I'd like to talk a little bit about is, some of you have already said it, you know, talked about this, is how much of yourself are you bringing to your writing? Like you had said, Taylor, you want to leave, it's almost like a historical document. You're showing someone who has struggled with these issues so that someone in the future can say, this person was going through this at a certain time, and look maybe how far we have come. So as writers, are you conscious of that in your writing? I know David Jacka, you had mentioned something about, gay horror, as we had talked about before. How much of your gender identity, sexual identity, do you bring into your writing? Do you make it a primary component? Is it a secondary component? Or is it just
So,
because this is who you are and you're just happen to write a story?
so basically, I'm like mostly exploiting like literally every faces of the LGBTQ community. For example, like my main character, at least I'm speaking for Free Expensive Lies, because when I published He Fell from Venus, I mean, I took like my main character from Free Expensive Lies as a consultant, pretty much. But in Free Expensive Lies, I've got like literally my main character is lesbian. My like for example, our employer, like they've got like a trans woman like leading Interpol units. They've got like, I want to have like literally every faces represented, but I don't want to make it like like something that is unusual, but I want to make it something that is common. For example, for me, like whether you love a man or a woman, regardless who you are, it doesn't matter. The most important is you must feel happy. You must be okay with your life. You must be okay with yourself, obviously, because otherwise it's where the fun starts, if I may say. I mean, and so yeah, it's like mostly like a time capsule, because we've been through like a past of like obscurantism, and obscurantism is like unfortunately coming back. We saw that recently, like literally everywhere. Like we can even see that with like the current situation not far away from me in Ukraine. Obscurantism is like literally coming back, and I feel like if we don't raise awareness on who we are, and how that the fact that we are not the bad guys, we're not mean one or dirty, we're just like normal people just loving someone different, or we are just like normal people, do not identifying as because we have like some gender problems. So it may feel like for someone in the future soothing to know that we face these problems in probably like tougher conditions, tougher situations, but in the end, we didn't give up. We still kept on fighting for who we are, because in the end, this is what we want. I mean, I think I'm quite right on this point. And I don't know what you guys are thinking about this.
I think something that you said that I found really, really important is the idea of like normalizing. So we all obviously have a lot of visibility. There are so many stories out there now, but what I try to do with my work is to just show that these people exist and it is normal. It's not necessarily a point of difference, two men fall in love, two women, whatever, and they have a life that they live just like everyone else. And so I think that's what I want to do with my work, is really kind of just promote that idea that, yeah, like we exist and there's nothing you can do about it. And you know what, like my couple is married and that's legal now for now. And they're just as likely as anyone else to check into a motel and never check out, you know what I mean? So for me, it's writing stories where the characters just happen to be gay. It's not necessarily the primary component, like shedding a light on LGBTQI plus issues, but just the fact that these people exist, we're here, and why can't we be the protagonists in our own stories?
That seems like it might be
I
the ultimate
absolutely
in
love that.
normalization, in a way.
Mhm.
If their sexuality is just part of who they are, as anyone's sexuality, is, and then the bad things happen to them, just like what you would consider would happen to any character. In a way, you've kind of nominalized or normalized it so much to where it doesn't matter, which is exactly where it should be in the first place. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that's what I'm aiming for.
Yeah.
So hopefully been successful to some degree.
That is a very beautiful thing, and I to kind of piggyback on that, I do the same thing in my stories. And in a lot of my stories, I have, at least in the short story collection that I'm working on now, I've made it a point to diversify all of my protagonists to come from any and every kind of sexuality or race or what have you. I wanted to make the diversity as vast as possible, but presenting it in a way that isn't meant to be perceived as preachy. Which is exactly what you, David Jack, is was talking about. And I believe that is a very important thing that you're doing, and I think it's a very important thing for a lot of people to read stuff like that, so that they can see how incredibly normal this is, and the more people, the more stories that we put out like this, the more normalized it becomes. And I think that the impact that is going to eventually have is going to be absolutely huge when we put out enough stories like this that depict our characters as who just happen to be gay, happen to be bi, happen to be pan, what have you, and people will just become desensitized to it. It's like, oh, okay, cool, well, that's who they love, awesome. The characters are just characters like anybody else.
Yeah,
and I think that's fantastic.
In the end, yeah.
For poetry, for me, it differs a bit in the sense that, like, I won't necessarily say I get preachy in it, but because it is such a condensed mode of writing, I am able to really focus on very specific things, like certain like political commentary, etc. And for both of my collections, I very clearly state, in like on like the back summary, so on and so forth, that the first collection was written about my experiences as a gay man growing up in rural America, and my second collection talks about those experiences post coming out, because I don't feel like those experiences are talked about enough. We kind of get to the point where we come out and everybody thinks that, oh, everything's done. There's no challenges. There's nothing to traverse anymore. And I will say that it is very personal. Like, I feel like poetry has been a mode for being very raw and vulnerable for a lot of poets throughout history, but it also gives me the opportunity to be more abstract and withhold if I feel the need to at the same time. Now, I do really want in my own work the entire LGBTQ plus community to take away something from it. And I feel like I've evolved with my work in that sense, because I've begun incorporating like I incorporated a character in my second collection, for example, which is being depicted in this kind of like cyberpunk future, who happens to be a non-binary character. And through that character, I've been able to not only create a commentary about my own, struggles with how I am physically represented, and how I kind of internally view myself, but I feel like it also could hopefully be a point of representation for others as well.
The concept of representation, I think, is what's crucial. At least what I'm seeing and hearing from all of you is the idea of making accessible stories or poems, anything, to where someone picks it up and they can identify with, like, here's someone who is like me, finally. And the closest thing I can say is, or about that, connecting with others who are finally, you meet people who are like you, is just very recently got in touch with an atheists writers group. Well, I'm not an atheist. I'm edging toward it. I'm definitely an apostate. And I met other people who knew the Bible like I did, who grew up in fundamentalist churches, who they were ministers, and and they all rejected it for the same reasons that I did. And I finally felt like, after decades of feeling like I was the only like in such isolation, finally met my tribe. And it just made me want to weep, because I've like, okay, I'm not the only one who feels this way. And so on that level, I feel like this is kind of what you're saying. This is what you want others to know. You're not the only one. There are others out here who've had this experience. Is that what makes representation so important to you?
The idea of belonging, that you belong somewhere, and that other people who read your work can have that feeling as well.
Yeah, we're all
Uh,
social creatures, and it's really refreshing to have that realization, or that reminder, that we're not alone. Yeah, that it's a really good feeling, to know that the idea of you is shared by other people, if not celebrated by other people, who share those same traits.
And I think for me as well, it's also about reaching people outside of that community. So if I get a couple of straight people, Mark, who who can read my work and also connect with the stories that I'm telling and the characters that I'm telling, regardless of sexuality, I think that's also quite a powerful thing. And that can help kind of bridge those gaps of a lack of understanding.
And that's helpful, because growing up without those representations, growing up for most of my life, where these kinds of things are still rather new in our culture in America. We have that Judeo-Christian kind of oppressive, puritanical kind of view of sexuality. So we're just, over the last decade, really still seeing growth and leaps, and there's still a lot of resistance to it. Especially now, as what Taylor had mentioned, this kind of swing to the conservative, and by conservative, we're not talking about small government, staying out of my business. We're talking about the radical Bible Belt, the religious right, and that's dangerous. I see, on all kinds of levels.
I think that the representation itself is important, but also the representation of what survival can look like. I think that's important for other LGBTQ plus people to see. But at the same time, I think that like, especially for me in poetry, like showcasing that survival and the fact that it's an ongoing process we must be vigilant with, like I think that's something that is universally something that can be connected with, because each person is surviving through something, right? It might be something different due to maybe their identity, their sphere of privilege, etc. But it all can come back to that point of connection, right? And I think that's important.
Yeah, 100%. I would agree with that.
yeah, indeed, yeah.
Yep.
So these stories kind of add to as one of the questions that David Jack sent me, there's representations of homosexuality and people on this spectrum. Do you think that these stories kind of help the general public in understanding of the dynamics of sexuality and where people can fall on this very wide spectrum?
I mean, today there's a lot of awareness. Like it starts like, for example, we can see here like on TV, there's much more like fictions, like talking, like representing, like, I mean, in in Europe, for us, like being gay is not like no longer a problem, but being trans is something else, obviously. But now it's like, you know, like we can see like a lot of new stories, like even like throughout the TV, many new series, many video games as well. I saw that in, for example, like Cyberpunk 2077 had like a trans character or someone. So there's like a lot of, you know, like people are now, they are like going to like represent us like as we are part of the society as well. We just have like a spectrum. We just have like an internal issue to deal with. But in the end, it's like we're just like normal people, just like straight, just like, you know, like normal people. I mean, what does normal mean in the end?
Yes, right.
So
Right. So we're trying to take the word normal and just kind of get rid of it as meaning anything. There is
exactly,
no, because if you
like,
say normal, then there are people who are not normal,
yeah.
and that's what we're trying to do, is get rid of that notion.
Exactly. For example, like personally, like when I started my transition, like back in France, I thought that I would face like a lot of discrimination. I obviously did, because French people love discrimination for some reason. But when I came in the UK, I started like, for example, I was actually scared because I was working in customer service, and I was scared because I was trans. And when I applied for a job, like my first manager told me, "You've got 2 legs, you've got 2 arms, you can work." So that's very easy. And now there's like much more, like, thanks to that representation, there's much more like acceptance towards, at least I'm talking for like trans people, because that's the case I know and I face. For example, I started like back 2 years ago. I was just like a team member. Now I'm already managing teams. So it's like kind of thanks to that representation, we can actually grow and gain like confidence. Like people are more likely to probably not trust us, but more likely to be proud of us, because we are actually like, we passed through something in the past, whether we are gay, whether we have like a sexual sexual orientation, or like gender like issue. We always have like this thing is like, people are proud of us somehow. They are proud of having someone different within their team, within their staff, within their companies. So it's kind of rewarding for us in some way, because they are proud, because, you know, they're hiring us, but like in return, there's still like a lot of people. For example, I see like a few days ago, I was serving someone who just laughed at me because, you know, I had like my makeup and my male voice. So it was kind of hurting, but like in the end, you just learn to shrug off and just, you know.
Well, this is what makes representation so important, because a lot of that discrimination is rooted in fear, because they might not know a person or an individual who is in one of our communities, right? I will never forget a conversation that I had with someone from high school, eye roll. But one of the people I knew in high school, a former bully who was very, very homophobic, came up to me one day as an adult and was like, "You know, Donnie, gay people aren't that bad. Like you're gay and you're fine." Kind of like this, like, you're giving me permission to exist, of course. But it came back down to the idea that this person heard from other people in his life that gay people were like these sexual succubi that were going to suck the straight out of them. And it's like, no, that's like, don't listen to that rhetoric. We're not monsters. We are literally human beings. And once you get to know somebody in the community, you start kind of disempowering that narrative that you are taught from childhood, right? I think that's what representation does. And I think, and each of you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I feel like we ourselves kind of act like representation too, because we have overcome those different things and still in some ways are overcoming things, but we exist, and that matters at the end of the day.
think it's also important for representation to make sure that not every character is the same. Because what I found from the 90s, any gay character on TV was basically just Jack from Will and Grace. And that's not helpful because, as we've just been talking about, there is a spectrum. And my husband is a bear. I'm not sure if anyone's familiar with that term, but that also comes potentially with a different type of attitude and a different way of carrying yourself. And lots of people, when they meet him, he was training people at work one day, and he said, "Oh, blah blah, my husband," and she corrected him and said, "Do you mean wife?" And he was like, "No, those words are very different. I do know the difference between the words, and I said it on purpose." She was like, "Oh my God, you don't look gay." And I always laugh at that, because what does that mean? What does it mean to look gay? Or to like, "Oh, you don't have a gay walk," or, what does that mean? So I think in terms of representation, it's really important to make sure that we're not always kind of just that Jack from Will and Grace that people are so familiar with, and that they understand that there are various ways that people can exist within that community.
It's like all the stereotypes that you see in entertainment, whether it's a racial stereotypes or cultural stereotypes, and that's something, as a student of popular culture, stereotypes exist because it helps that sense of tribal belonging and understanding of the other. We'll put that in italics. They're different in these three ways, and so it's easy for us to identify this other group that might be threatening to us. And I think what you had mentioned, Donnie, that fear aspect, I think that's got to be a integral part of it, because so much of the rhetoric that's going on now in trying to push for these very conservative agendas is worrying about simply teaching about people who are not straight or are the LGBTQ plus issues is automatically going to make straight kids gay. And I saw a wonderful post from a gay writer who put up these memes, who showed pictures of all this straight sexual representation, all these cartoons and Disney cartoons that he grew up with. He says, like, all the straight cartoons in the world didn't make me straight, And so I just thought, you're turning it on its head. That was wonderful, because like, oh, there you go. Okay, it is innate. It is who you are. But I thought that was a wonderful, wonderful way to deal with that kind of fear mongering.
That's something I was like comparing, because you, Donnie, you mentioned like about like fears. For example, like back in the Roman Empire, the Roman used to call like barbarian those who did not speak Latin. So it was like they were called them barbarian because they were literally scared of them, because they were like saying the same. I mean, in the end, like the problem we're like facing right now is not like, it's something that has always been existing. This is something like very human. It's like you're always scared of what you do not know. So I think, and this is why like representation helps us a lot, is because the fact is like now people are getting out now to get used to us, to know us, like who we are and what we want, and to show that we are not like the bad guys, or we're not like here to like actually like force kids to become, I don't know, transgender, gay, or whatever. We're not that. We're just like, what people don't understand is that we just want to live our life freely. We don't want to live our lives according to the book.
I think there's also a difference between fear and maybe ignorance, or being a little bit naive, because they might watch this, so I won't say the name, but my one of my brothers was very kind of, he probably did come from a space of fear, but it was also based on those stereotypes and things that he had heard, which to me also was a form of naivete. So we've kind of gotten quite close now, and he said to me years ago, similar to what that person from high school said to you, Donnie, was like I always thought X about gay people, and you're not like that at all. And I'm like, well, you don't know how many gay people you've actually met because we don't wear a sign on our forehead that says like gay, you know, in big pink lights or something. So you just need to kind of understand that you probably have crossed paths with so many gay people, lesbian, pan, trans, you know, all walks of life, and just not even known it. So, and I think that's quite an important thing to pass on to people as well in our work, and just in general.
I like asking questions and to people who have an issues with this. It's similar to that, David Jack, as are all straight people the same? You know, that kind of thing. Like there's an acceptance of straight people are, you know, of course they're all over the place. Everyone's different, and I think you're all right in that. Where, you know, the straight community, the lessons and images that we have been given in our popular culture and through our schools and through our churches, you know, there's been a lot of demonization of anyone outside of that. And so I think we are in those awkward early steps of acclimatization. And I think it's going to be a generation. I think this generation now, the younger generations, they're a lot more willing to embrace this sense of fluidity with their gender and sexual identities. And I think the generation after that, I'm hoping, will even be more so. And these issues won't. This will be one of those relics, like Taylor was mentioning. This will be a relic that people will look back and say, "Oh, yeah, back in 2022, they were having to still discuss this. How antiquated? How, you know?" But
it is funny that we are talking about it in 2022, right?
Right, but I think though maybe this fulfills one of those functions of getting the word out there and just normalizing it. I don't know how else we get better as a society other than to continue talking about it and putting it out there.
I think at the end of the day, it comes back to education, right? Like,
that's what I was gonna say.
Yeah, like representation, like it's the vehicle that usually perpetuates it most would be education, but it also needs to be solidified by, you know, allies as well, because allies are the individuals who go through that learning experience and they can model that learning experience for other people, right? And I think that at the end of the day, like if representation can do that for allies, then it would have like that snowball effect, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because there's a lot of undoing. Oh, I'm sorry, Evan. Go ahead.
Oh, sorry. No, I was thinking it's good to find the the resources for the knowledge in people you know, or really anywhere you can find it, and talk about it. We just need to talk more, and that's going to help with the normalization. That's going to help with the reduction of fear, and to not be incredibly silent about it. And I mean, I'm saying this from a place of somebody who's in this community in Florida, seeing as what's going on here, and in our individual political climate is not great, but for the LGBT community. But the more that we talk about ourselves to each other, the more that we talk about ourselves to our allies, the more that and the more that we the more vocal we are, the better. I mean, is really the bottom line.
I wonder if, along with the representation and the education on people on the other side of that fence, as a straight person like myself, and the community that I'm going to stand in for, there has to be a sense of deconstruction. Just like people who go through deconstruction as with religious beliefs, which I'm well acquainted with, there has to be a deconstruction of the notions of other things that you've grown up thinking about the other. We're going to put that in capitalized, the other, and italicized. And I think that's the component is, yes, it's great to have education representation. Now, how do we go about teaching or helping the sense of deconstruction? Because there are some people who are just going to be unwilling to accept anyone who seems different for whatever reason. But for other allies out there, or people who want to be allies, what do you think would be a really good way to help and the deconstruction of their own perhaps perceived notions or the things that they grew up thinking? What steps do you think they could do to help begin to deconstruct those and to start with a clean level slate?
I think one big thing, and I just had this conversation with some colleagues today in the context of diversity and equity in higher education. I think it's important for throughout this educational experience, and I like that you mentioned deconstruction. I think it's important for people to understand that being held accountable for saying something incorrectly or not knowing something, that's not an attack. Accountability isn't an attack. And I think once people can get past that hurdle, being open to listening to different stories and experiences, seeing different aspects of representation, it becomes easy to acknowledge and accept, and then, spread that awareness.
To be honest,
Yeah,
I think the word deconstruction is a bit ugly. I would rather say improvement rather than deconstruction. Personally, I'm also from a Christian background. I grew up like in churches and everything, and it was like actually like, for example, back to like, for example, the Romans. Like there was this emperor. I think it was Mark Antony or even Jules Caesar. It was actually like they were actually gay, and it was like normal by then. It's just like churches came back with their IDs and they literally like turned the world upside down in a certain way. So I think deconstructing is probably not the word, because if you say like deconstructing, it means like destroying something that some people have built. I think it's just like not destroying. It's like not destroying your house, but just adding another room. I think this is what as LGBT community must do to make sure that everybody would actually go and accept us. Because if we go and deconstruct, if we go in imposing the ideas, if we go in like this thing, this is how we're going to be marginalized. I mean, history spoke for that. So deconstructing is probably too big, but improving and accepting would be probably a better word, I think.
It makes perfect sense. And like you all bringing elements of yourself into your writing and your experience, that's the word that I've seen so often with people who have come through religion, and that deconstruction is the term used for kind of to try to break down the scaffolding of all of those teachings. And so, but that makes perfect sense. I think from that comes a sense of freedom and willingness to look at things differently. But I like that, adding another house or improving. Those are also very good ways of looking at it.
I couldn't help but think of the word compartmentalizing, like compartmentalizing where certain fears originate, why like certain beliefs and impressions of marginalized communities, like where they come from. Essentially, in my conversations with individuals, that's like by leading with those types of questions, like how do you compartmentalize like your understanding of the LGBTQ plus community. That's when people can start piecing it together themselves, kind of like a puzzle, right? Where they're like, oh wait, that's where my fear of the trans community comes from, or that's where my fear of gay men comes from. Like, and it usually comes from what people have told them, people close to them, unfortunately.
I think it's important for people to know what you don't know, and not be too afraid to respectfully ask, you know. Um, it, we as a community, I'm like, oh, well, I guess I shouldn't speak for the entire community. I'm not a, a spokesperson, obviously, um, but many of us are open to educating. Um, it's okay to open up a conversation with us about the things that aren't fully understood, the things that, the fears, the misunderstandings that may need some light shed upon. It's okay if it helps. If it helps the situation, then at least from my standpoint, I am all about talking about it. You know, I'm an open book with it, and I'll answer anything to the best of my ability. And I think that openness is something that we can provide that is hopefully going to make it more comfortable for other people to educate themselves.
It serves as a model. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and building off that, like I think, like part going back to representation, I think another thing to acknowledge that's crucial in this educating experience is acknowledging privilege as well. Because like we have varying degrees of privilege depending on what communities we're in. Like for example, I am a white cisgender male. Due to those different identities, I have certain privileges that other groups do not. And I know that a lot of people outside of our communities, when they hear the word privilege, they often they kind of cringe at the word because they feel that it's being weaponized against them. But again, going back to what I said earlier about people realizing that conversations about accountability and privilege, they don't have to be an attack. Like they're not an attack. It's simply looking at things for how they actually are when it comes to focusing on people's varying experiences in the world.
Those are the kind
Yeah,
of assumptions that we have. I'm sorry for speaking. That we grow up and I'm bringing a popular culture theory to that. It's like we are all growing up in different cultures. We see everything through a pair of like colored lenses. This is our cultural impositions. This is on us. This is our understanding of the world until we learn about other cultures firsthand or other ways of looking at it. So all of our prejudices and all of our beliefs about the other are only changed when we have direct contact and experience with that other. And so I think that, and
but I think they also have to be willing to accept that, because if they're encountering the other from that space of fear or anger or hatred, then nothing's going to change anyway. So there needs to be a willingness to go, okay, you are different from me. It's not an us versus them scenario that we're talking about, just two people having a conversation. And I think, like what Ivan was saying, I feel like I have a responsibility to be open to that conversation as well. So, I mean, I'm in by no means am I a spokesperson either, but I can speak to my own experiences, which do resemble other people from the community as well. So that I think there needs to be a willingness on both sides to have that respectful mutual meeting in the middle. And all of us need to kind of put our prejudices and assumptions about the other person aside. Because I know it can be very easy for people in the LGBTQI plus community to automatically roll their eyes when someone asks a question like, what's it like to be gay? And you're like, oh, for God's sake. But that's their way of trying to open up a conversation. So I think from my perspective, I have a responsibility to not roll my eyes and just say, well, what exactly do you mean by that? And I'm happy to talk to you about it. And I think kind of helping them enter that space safely is a huge part of the work that we're trying to do.
I think we hyperload so much of a person's personhood because through their sexuality. The assumption is there is some abstract difference, and that's because of the hyper focus on sexuality as somehow making us different in a way that we don't comprehend. And I'm wondering, any thoughts on that idea? Have you experienced that or thought about that?
I would say that one thing that I've experienced as an activist is I will often hear people say, why do you have to make it about who you have sex with? Right. And I kind of have to like reorient, no pun intended, the question where I tell them like being LGBTQ plus, especially when we're focusing on like sexual identity as well, like it isn't just about who we choose to have sex with. Like it's about representation. It's about who people see us with. It's about how well our state acknowledges us with the people that we cohabitate with or connect with, right? Like there's so many other variables. And when you add gender identity onto that as well, like that adds on additional layers too, because a lot of people, like, even when it comes to talking about gender identity, they will conflate it with sexual identity and completely overlook the fact that that's something that's a different conversation, right? It's an important conversation, but you can't conflate them necessarily in every context.
Can you understand how that could be confusing to people who are trying to adapt and learn about these things? Because like connecting sexual identity and gender identity as
Mhm.
two separate issues, because that's a difficult concept for people to grasp.
It is. And it's difficult to explain too, like especially if like I can't stop thinking about like the poor 16-year-old who just came out needing to explain these types of things to people, right? But I've found my success in explaining them by just illustrating the fact that like think of sexual identity, gender identity, and physical representation as being a plane, right? And there are different accesses on this plane, right? And each individual falls on a different point on like across these accesses or axes. I'm saying it wrong. But and usually when you can kind of like correlate it or create like an analogy or an image, like that usually helps. I know like for me also, I will talk about representation. Like I will say, well, like here is why it's important to talk about sexual identity and gender identity, because think of it from our perspective. Since we were kids, we literally in our exposure to media see cisgender heteronormative relationships depicted and celebrated all the time. And there's nothing wrong with that. But imagine living in a world where that was made the reverse, or where you weren't able to see that in any capacity. Like that would be very isolating and damaging, right? And usually when you kind of like switch that, that then it kind of becomes a bit clearer. But that's a lot to explain too at the same time.
Sure.
There's also like this thing, like you mentioned, like talking about like exchanging about like these issues and everything. This is like one of the reasons why I went like quiet for like 4 years, and I finally decided to came out of like anonymous, because when I actually like following like something like terrible that happened to me in France, I'm gonna talk about this in my book, in my not my book, my blog soon. I've been like just because I was transgender, I've been already and it took me like 6 months to actually I was receiving on a daily basis death threats, rape threats on my phone from like various people who didn't want to understand that I was just transgender. Like you cannot imagine the number of time I've been reading the word um, you know, I'm not gonna say it aloud here, but I think you get the one. This was like something like there's like obviously like some people that are willing to actually come to us and talk about like this identity, this like sexual orientation thing, but there are also like some people that are like deliberately idiot and don't want to actually do that. And just because they know that we are in a position, not, I wouldn't say weakness, but we are actually like showing something that is quite intimate to us. Then they're attacking us on this, and it's like actually way damaging. This was why I went like anonymous, and I said like I'm not going back to social network. It took me like 3 years, 4 years to actually come back, and now I decided with all of you guys to actually like take the next step. But there's a lot of like people willing to actually come to us, but there's also like some people that are like locked literally and don't even want to open, and I face this especially like, you know, thanks to internet, and we have all the power to hide behind nicknames. Like so many, I mean, like when I received like threats, like I was like mentioned, like I remember like one of these texts, it was like some guy, like I didn't know him. He was like sending me my address, and he told me, once you get out of your house, I'm gonna rape you. This was actually something, so, you know, when you're 23 and facing this is quite traumatizing. But it's like, I don't really know what to do with like this, because like in the end, we mentioned, like the construction improvements, we're all like trying to build a new house, probably like with some different like cultures and everything. And what to do with those who do not want to come to conversation? That's the thing.
And for those people, first I want to say, like, Taylor, I celebrate you being here, and thank you for being here, despite all of those horrible things. I think that the metaphorical house that you refer to, when those who are resistant to it, who don't want to enter or acknowledge it, I think that's when allies step in. That's when allies come in and illustrate for these other individuals that, like, hey, these people matter, these people exist. That's when they, you know, take the field and start doing the educating as well, because there are certain points in our experiences, and while I think all of us here are pretty secure with sharing our experiences and talking about representation, there are many in our community who don't have the bandwidth to do that, especially if they are in a place where they're experiencing traumas, or if they're not surrounded by people where they can feel safe. Like, I think that's when allies need to, you know, take on that role of educating.
And I'm glad that you kind of framed it that way, that everyone, we kind of all have to work together in helping move us forward, you know, to something more accepting and kinder to one another. I want to thank you all for coming tonight to this panel. I thank you for your graciousness to forgive my guffaws if I didn't say the right nomenclature, and for being patient with me. Thank you for your honesty and your openness and your stories. I definitely want to talk with you all as writers individually, and I hope that we can do more of these kinds of things to get the word out and to help spread the news and education and normalcy, that we can get to a point one day where these things don't have to be talked about. But before we go, I'd like to give everyone an opportunity to tell, if you have publications or books, poems, everything out, where can we find your writing, your books? We want to purchase, we want to support you. Where can we help? So Taylor, where can we find your book?
Okay, so well, basically I've got a website. I mean, it's quite confusing because my website ends up in .co.uk, but it's accessible worldwide. So you can buy my book on my website, my books actually. So my latest publication was, so I published like the highlights of like my Free Expensive Life, Free Expensive Life lengthy book. I shortened it into something like much easier and accessible for everyone, but everything can be like purchased from like my website. You can also type my name on Amazon, Smashword. I found my book in Apple iBooks recently. I was actually like kind of thrilled to see that, didn't know that it would be like that extended. Then after, like, where you want to follow me is mostly like on Instagram. I'm mostly active on Instagram. I'm active on Facebook as well, but not that much. Like I said, due to these issues, I'm like going like quite shy to social medias and everything. But yeah, mostly like where I share like most of my things is on my website and Instagram. So if you guys want to follow me, just Taylor Harding Jenkins, and this is where I'm at.
Thank you. And Donnie, where can we find your works?
You can find my work on my website, donniewinter.com. You can also find both of my poem collections, Carbon Footprint and Feats of Alchemy, on Amazon. If you're not a fan of Amazon, you can also find them on Leopard Print Books, which is a traveling pop-up bookstore that I've been supporting recently. You can also find my work on my YouTube channel titled Donnie Speaks. That's my poetry channel where I will post performances of some of my poems. And beyond that, I am active on Instagram and Twitter and Facebook. So if you want to follow me on any of those, feel free.
Ivan?
Excuse me. So my novella, The Town Beyond the Trees, is available on Amazon on paperback and ebook or for Kindle, and also available on Nook via barnesandnoble.com. You can find links to that and links to all of my social medias, and also my horror movie review column on my website, ivanlopezwriting.com.
Thank you. And David Jack?
Gosh, I'm the only one that doesn't have a website. So
The website here.
That's terrible. But if you look me up on Instagram, I've got my link tree in the bio, which links to Amazon and Book Depository, Booktopia. You can also find it Barnes and Noble, but I'm in a couple of anthologies that you'd be better off going to the publisher themselves, Erie River and Hellbound Books, for those if you're interested, or just ask me and I'll send you a copy. Yeah.
Excellent. Thank you again. This has been a wonderful experience, and I hope you've all feel like you've been able to express yourselves, and it's been an honor, Taylor, that you have come out of being anonymous on this show. I'm grateful, and we're all honored for that. Thank you very much. So, you've been watching and listening to Between the Lines. You can find us at unsaneradio.com, listen to full episodes, or download to your device. You can watch us on our YouTube page, which is where you're at. That's where it is. Between the Lines podcast. Don't forget to hit the subscribe button. And we're also on the Hotel Talk channel on Roku. Check us out. If you know someone who would like our show, tell them about us. And if you're a writer who'd like to join me for a chat, email me at betweenthelines54@yahoo.com. Betweenthelines54@yahoo.com. And here's my cheesy outro. See you next time, Between the Lines.